Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this interaction organized as a part of the NLF Reading Challenge 2021. My name is Karthika. I'm the head of reading at Neev Academy. We're tremendously excited to be here, and we hope you are too. The NLF Reading Challenge is a 6-month long reading event from January to June 2021 for students between 10 to 13 years of age. It is open for participants to take part in the competitive or the non competitive tracks. We have students from across India participating in the challenge. In addition to fun book-based activities and regular book chats and author interactions, the challenge will conclude with a quiz competition that will see the 3 best teams win gold, silver, and bronze engraved trophies, respectively, certificates of achievement, and a great set of books. Before we dive into the interaction, we would just like to point out to our audience that as this is a webinar, we will not be able to respond if you raise your virtual hand. Please do type your questions in the Q&A box. In fact, if you already have your questions ready, please feel free to type them out. If you're a student, a teacher, or a school librarian, please do mention the name of your school along with your question as well. Today we have with us a very special guest, the illustrator and author Ben Rothery, whose book Hidden Planet and Illustrator's Love Letter to Planet Earth, which was shortlisted for the Waterstones Children's Book Prize 2020, most of us have read. Ben is a detail-obsessed illustrator and writer from Norwich via Cape Town who likes pencils and heavy objects. He combines multiple processes to create intricate and delicate illustrations and repeating patterns full of fine detail and vibrant color for a diverse array of clients. Much of Ben's work is inspired or informed by his love of nature, having grown up variously wanting to be a shark, a dinosaur, or David Attenborough crossed with Indiana Jones. Only relatively recently settling upon illustration as a compromise, allowing him to bring those fantasies to life on paper. Ben's illustration practice and vivid fantasy life is run from a small but perfectly formed studio in the heart of beautiful London, which he shares with an unnecessarily large collection of very sharp pencils. When not illustrating, Ben can be found cooking, traveling, or picking up heavy objects and putting them back down again, sometimes for hours at a time, while pursuing his interest as an amateur strongman in his spare time. Welcome, Ben. We're very happy to have you with us today.
It's lovely to be here. Yeah, very excited.
It's excellent that we're able to do this with you. And we know that you're going to do a reading for us from the book.
Yep.
We thought that before we get started with that, we'd show a few spreads that we really loved to the audience.
Oh, perfect. Nice.
So this is the spread with the clouded leopard, and you can see that it has a personality that's all its own. Another spread that we particularly liked was this one of the zebras and the motion dazzle, or the phenomenon known as the motion dazzle. It can't even easy to draw, I'm sure.
No, it was really sort of interesting. So obviously motion dazzle is a type of camouflage where the sort of the shapes of the animals and how they interact kind of breaks up their outlines, and it makes it hard to concentrate on one individual animal. So obviously that makes it very hard for a predator to lock onto one and catch it.
Right.
So from the perspective of somebody drawing it, it also makes it very hard to concentrate on the thing that you're drawing because the whole thing kind of shifts in front of your eyes a little bit. So gave me a bit of a headache, but so I'm glad it worked in the end. So yeah, I learned firsthand how motion dazzle works because it worked on me. So
nice. We also wanted to show our audience a spread from the book, which shows Ben's desk. And you can see his collection of pencils there, and some very interesting washi tape as well.
Yeah, that's my washi tape actually. So
okay, all right. So I know that we know that Ben is particularly attached to the spread with the helmeted Guinea fowl, and so now we will leave it to him to read to you from it. Over to you, Ben.
Okay, right. So the helmeted Guinea fowl. It's one of my favorite birds, so that's why I chose to include it in the book, and that's why I've sort of chosen this spread. So these sort of spotted birds have a harsh and memorable call. It's somewhere between the sound of like a donkey and a rusty door hinge creaking, and it's a sound that really reminds me of my childhood. I grew up sort of going backwards and forwards between the UK and South Africa, so it's a sound that really sort of evokes memories of home. We ended up even keeping some on our farm in England because it was a reminder of our time in Africa and it made mum less homesick. So they have a distinctive black and white pattern of spots on their bodies and bald heads, and they can be found all over Africa, from sort of rolling savannas to grassy side streets, even in people's gardens. And they're the oldest members of a group called Galliforms, which includes turkeys, chickens, and pheasants. And their fossils date back to the Eocene period. So that's about 40 million years ago. So they're a really old family of birds. And they form flocks of up to about 30 birds and travel behind herds of animals like buffalo and wildebeest, sort of foraging on a wide variety of foods, from seeds and insects to small lizards, as well as ticks and pests that are stirred up by the herds as they move. Now, their characteristic call and their speckled appearance has given rise to one of my favourite folk tales as well, which my Oma used to tell me, so my grandmother, when I was little. And that story is how the guinea fowl got her spots. So the story goes a bit like this. In the beginning, when everything was new, the guinea fowl was a small bird with dull black feathers. She wasn't speckled like she is today. Guinea fowl was friends with cow. They would walk together for hours, the cow munching grass and guinea fowl scratching in the dirt for bugs and seeds. When the cow ate, she had her head down and she couldn't see danger, so guinea fowl acted as her eyes. And many times, guinea fowl's raucous call would save cow from hunters like the lion slinking through the long grass of the savannah. Cheated of his meal by her alarm call, the lion hated guinea fowl. And so to this day, the lion is always looking for her. So to keep her friends safe, the cow dipped her tail in some milk and sprinkled guinea fowl with the milk, giving the guinea fowl her distinctive black and white pattern that she still has to this day. And that allows her to better hide in the dappled light that shines through the long grass of the plains. So I love this story because it's a really cute story, but it also describes the real relationship between the helmeted guinea fowl and other animals, which is a type of mutualistic symbiosis. So that's a process where sort of both parties in the interaction gain something from the other. So the guinea fowl gets food, so it gets all the seeds and bugs and things that are disturbed by the herd as it moves around. And the herd has an extra set of eyes looking out for it. And it also describes the guinea fowl's pattern and how that pattern acts as camouflage by breaking up its outline as it's kind of moving through the grasses, in the same way that like a zebra's pattern breaks up its outline or a tiger's pattern breaks up its outline. It's not so much about kind of camouflaging it so that it disappears, so much as making it hard to kind of work out exactly where it is. So yeah, that's kind of, this is my favorite spread for that reason, really, or one of them anyway. So I think, yeah, that's that one.
Thanks, Ben. That was lovely. And thank you so much for sharing why this is one of your favorites. We've started getting a few questions in from the viewers.
Lovely.
We have Sanika Kote from Purna Learning Center, who said that she used the book as part of her project. We have Ayan Gupta and Arya Guha, whose questions, and Kunal Mithun, whose questions are sort of interlinked. How were you able to make each and every detail? Where did you get the inspiration to write the book? And Ayan also adds that he really loved how you made the hair of the zebra. So perhaps you could shed some light on that.
Okay, you might need to remind me of some of the questions as we go along. I'll sort of go with the inspiration one first, because it's the one that I remember most clearly. So I work with Ladybird, sort of part of Penguin, it's a big publisher, and the book is basically for kids. Well, it's for me, really. So it's for kids that are like the child that I used to be. So I tried to imagine the book that I would have wanted when I was younger, and something where you're being sort of introduced to animals and sort of understanding the context that they exist in, and kind of really getting into the weeds of the detail of that. And so that's kind of what inspired me to do it. And the publisher were kind enough to allow me to create that book that I kind of always wanted when I was younger. And then what was the next? I don't know if that answers the question. I hope it does. What were the next questions? Sorry.
How do you add so much detail to your illustrations? Actually, that also ties in with another question that's just coming from Ria Bopanna, who says, do you draw from images? Do you observe animals in real life?
Okay, so I can answer that perfectly. So it's a mixture of things. So in terms of how I add the detail, I use really, really sharp so I work in a mixture of different ways. So I work sometimes digitally, sometimes traditionally, sometimes a combination of the two, but whichever. So when I mean working digitally, I mean sort of drawing into a graphics tablet, working traditionally using pencils, pens, fine liners and inks. But however I draw, it's always the same process. So very, very sharp pencils, very tiny sort of little details and a long time. So you kind of start from a very faint outline of the drawing and draw the same, almost the same thing on top of itself again and again and again, kind of layering up the detail so that you kind of create. I mean, in the end, I draw things in the early stages that by the end you can't see because they've been drawn over the top, but it all kind of goes towards creating this sort of, hopefully this three-dimensional idea of the animal and a bit of its personality, how it moves, and what's going on kind of underneath, because otherwise you can end up with something really detailed that just looks flat and not alive. And then in terms of what I draw from, it's a mixture. So obviously there's some observation. I kind of grew up sort of in South Africa, Botswana, and Namibia. I worked in Kenya. I've been back a lot, obviously, sort of since I've been living in the UK. And I have access to Natural History Museum and ZSL London and a few other places that I could work with. So I can go and see things in real life, and I can take photos and do sketches. But then when it comes to doing the actual sort of piece, like it could take me 100 hours or more to do that illustration. So I tend to look at what I describe as like composite images. So I'll get lots of images of the same animal in different poses and draw from all of them. So it's not a copy of one image. It's a pose that I've chosen, but then I'm using information from all of the different ones to get a sense of, kind of how it articulates, or, with the guinea fowl, like sort of bobbing little head as it moves around or whatever. So it's a mixture of lots of different reference and lots of different sort of methods in terms of how I'm working, but they all kind of come together to create hopefully something that looks real and has a bit of personality to it.
That's incredible. Actually, it was one of my questions where there's a clear sense of movement that comes through the pictures, where you've got the Komodo dragons, the babies hatching out of the eggs, or you've got the clownfish in the ocean. And I was wondering if that was purposefully done, but clearly it's a part of your process.
Yeah, I'm very keen that something that I loved when I was younger, but something that I kind of noticed an absence in was kind of traditional natural history illustration. So, all the way back to sort of, James Audubon, or like the artist whose name I've forgotten, who was on sort of Darwin's Voyage on the Beagle. Like they do these beautiful things, but they look sort of really detailed, but flat and dead. And part of that is the fact that they were drawing, from taxidermy, or they're sort of specimens that have been kind of killed and preserved and then brought back, or they're kind of drawing from their memory of something they've seen. And so they don't really have an understanding of how that animal, sort of how it actually moves when it's alive. And so for me, it's kind of really important that what I'm interested in, I want that illustration, that sort of that two-dimensional image to kind of convey a sense of what that animal is in life, because that illustration is there accompanying the text to try and introduce the reader to something and give them a sense of what that animal actually is. So it's really important that it has some of that in it. So yeah, it's a very conscious effort to try and do that, and it's really lovely to hear that it actually works. So.
And on that note, though, and this is something also that you touched on, in terms of giving or a personality that a particular animal or bird sort of imbues. Now, all of the portraits in Hidden Planet are stunning, but there are a few distinct spreads where you can sense a personality that comes out at you, like with the clouded leopard. There's a sense of mystery. There's the eccentricity of the Hoatzin that comes through. There's the rock hyrax, which hits the reader with curiosity, and in your words, a permanently suspicious expression. So
yeah, I mean, when you're an animal that everything wants to kill, and you have no defense mechanisms at all, like the rock hyrax, which in South Africa we call a dussie, or a rock rabbit. They're not rabbits at all, but yeah, I mean, I think you would be permanently suspicious and sort of permanently slightly annoyed and grumpy when literally everything is out to get you. And so I kind of like that. And I think when I was drawing it, I I mean, it's maybe a bit of my own kind of personality being added onto it, but you know, the rock hyrax is the elephant's closest relative. So you imagine this enormous sort of impressive animal, the elephant, and then you know the Dussie is about that big and a bit rubbish. And I just think I like the idea that that animal would be a bit sort of, you know, I mean, I think I would be.
So this is something. Is this something that was at the back of your mind, that you're transferring these impressions that you have of these animals through your illustrations to your readers?
A little bit, because I want the whole purpose of Hidden Planet, of Sensational Butterflies before it, Waterworld that followed it, and the new books that I'm working on now. The whole purpose of these books is, you know, in conservation, in kind of, you know, in the world around us at the moment, you know, we're going through a little bit of a crisis in terms of, you know, sort of loss of biodiversity and sort of, you know, habitat erosion and all that sort of stuff. And there's this sort of vast universe of animals out there. And most people don't know about most of them. You know about sort of tigers and elephants and lions and whatever else, but you don't maybe know about some of these other ones. And I kind of feel like in order to protect something, you have to care about it. In order to care about it, you have to know it. And so by introducing people to these animals and hopefully conveying some of what it is that actually kind of is their personality, or kind of just making, I don't know, trying to make them a little bit less abstract, I guess, that maybe that might kind of engender some of that feeling, you know, sort of you know about this animal you've never heard of before, and you're interested in it, and you know, and so it becomes, I don't know, maybe makes it a bit more real. Yeah, so that's something I'm trying to do.
So is that then a similar motivation behind your creating the bestiary on the website, where you sort of give your readers a downloadable image of a part of an animal or a bird, and you talk to them about, say, if it's a feather, you talk to them about the parts of a feather. You give them an image that they can color in.
Mm-hmm.
Do you still host the AMA on Instagram, where you talk to your readers about
I was doing it. It went on pause for a little while because I had another book to finish, and I opened a shop. Well, I opened the studio up as a shop in Spitalfields in central London. So that kind of took most of my time. But as I now finish, I've just finished yesterday, actually, the most recent book. So I'll have a little bit more time. So I'm going to start doing the AMA again. So yeah. I was just trying to kind of create a bit of more of an interactive thing. So, you know, like we're doing now, you know, with the questions from the audience and kind of it's basically trying to kind of do that on a kind of weekly basis, and trying to sort of, I guess, answer people's questions and kind of interact a little bit more. So I think I've spotted a couple of little questions flashing up, actually. So
yes.
You remind me what those are. I'll try and answer them really quickly.
Sure. In fact, the questions that we can't get to, we'll write to you with some of them after.
No worries, of course, yeah.
We have a cute question from Sanika from Pune Learning Center, who says, do you have any pets? And have you seen all the animals in the book?
Yes and yes. So I do have, I've got a cat somewhere here. 1 second. This is Kimball. That's the cat. So he's incredibly grumpy and quite big. So I'll put him down before he bites me. And we've got got a dog and some other stuff at my parents' house, sort of on the farm. And then there's, you know, kind of farm animals. And then in terms of seeing animals in the book, yeah, for the most part, I think there's 1 or 2 that I haven't seen, but I would have seen them last year. But then obviously, you know, kind of COVID meant that no traveling happened. So I had a trip to the Arctic that I was supposed to do, a trip to Indonesia, and another trip to go home to South Africa. So there's a few that I haven't seen that I would have seen, but then I couldn't see. I don't know if that makes sense. So yes to both questions.
Thank you. I hope Kimball is very tolerant, I see, of your session, your cat.
I mean, he's been biting my leg through part of it, but I've just been pretending it's not happening. So.
Right. Okay, all right. So we have 10 minutes to go.
Sure, yeah.
We have an interesting question from Monica, who says that you mentioned it takes over 100 hours to create each image. Do you ever hit artist block? How do you keep yourself motivated to draw for so many hours?
Yeah, I mean, it can take anywhere from sort of really simple. You know how in the books there's a range of different styles. So there's some quite simple ones, and then there's some like the clouded leopard, or you know, or the Guinea, for example, that were closer to 100 hours. Some are even longer. So I do hit artist block when I'm writing sometimes, and I do at sort of at various points kind of in the early stages, like when I'm sketching or trying to kind of do the composition. Sometimes I can't figure out exactly how I want it to look, and usually that's kind of when I'll sort of step away and, you know, I go compete as a strongman, so I'll go pick up some really stupid heavy stuff and clear my brain, and then I come back to it and I'm a bit fresh. But one of the things that's sort of quite useful, the actual sort of process of taking the illustration from a sketch to the finished thing is almost a mechanical process. So, you know, I'll do the outline and then sort of map out where everything's going to go. So if it's a wing and the wing's like this, you know, I'll do all the lines that kind of make the shape of the wing, and then the shape of all the feathers and all the rest of it. And then it's almost kind of a process of kind of coloring it in almost, you know, sort of I'll work from a point, usually the head, usually the face, like the eye, and then I'll work backwards. I'll do the whole of the rest of it. And so it's you almost kind of switch off, you know, you're just there and you're doing it. But, you know, I'll have like an audio book in, or I'll be listening to some music, or I'll have something else. And I'm not really, you know, I'm concentrating in the sense that I don't want to make a mistake, but my brain is kind of all over, you know, and I'm just going through the process. And that's kind of, you know, I've been doing this sort of professionally for 11 years. And I was a student for 4 before that. So, you know, I'm 15, 16 years into this now. And so, you know, I trust the process, you know, I can almost switch off and just and get on with it. So motivation is kind of less of an issue. It's just, you know, I have a job to do, I have a deadline, music on, start, and I go somewhere else. So.
Nice. It segues really well into a next set of questions, which are all about why do you become an illustrator? Kiran Singh, who joins us from the International School of Lausanne, says, where and what kind of qualification in art do you need for publishing to become an illustrator in books? We also have Vanya Kaushal, who says, did you have to learn any graphics before deciding to be an illustrator? What made you choose this stream of being an author and an illustrator?
Okay, so I'll try and answer them all as best I can. If I miss anything, just remind me. I've always wanted to be an illustrator, really. You know, I've always wanted to create art in the context of books. I never really wanted to be like a painter and kind of just do things and put them in a gallery or whatever. You know, I wasn't interested in that. So this is very much kind of where I always wanted to take my artwork. And I think what I really wanted to do, probably if I was honest, was to be some sort of scientist, you know, out in the field, you know, flipping over logs and bothering the animals that I found underneath it. But I'm not particularly good at maths or science, but I write fairly well and I can draw. So this was my way of kind of being a part of that world that I couldn't be part of because I wasn't particularly good at other stuff. You know, I've got to take off my shoes to count higher than 10. So it wasn't there. Science wasn't for me. So that's kind of what I wanted, why I've become an illustrator, I guess. In terms of the qualifications, I mean, I have like a BA in illustration, so I have a bachelor's degree and a foundation degree before that, but you don't have to have one. I mean, one of the wonderful things about illustration and publishing is it's a bit of a meritocracy in one sense, that good enough is good, you know, is qualified enough, you know. So if you have an idea, nobody has ever asked me in the 11 years since I graduated if I have a degree and what it is. In interviews like this, yes, but in terms of going for a job, the only question that they're interested in is, can you do the job? So the degree is very useful in the sense that, you know, it teaches you some of the skills that you need. but I mean, a lot of what I do, I kind of taught myself afterwards. So it was useful in a lot of ways, but kind of, it's not a barrier to entry if you don't have one. And then did any graphics, I think was one of the other questions. Like, so, do you mean like graphic design, kind of like layouts and stuff? It is useful. And it is stuff that I learned on my degree, plus other things that I kind of learned subsequently or taught myself. But again, you're working with designers. So, I have an amazing team at Penguin who designed the books with me, like James Stevens and Erin Brockwell, my kind of art director and designer who I work with, and Shannon Cullen, who edits for me. So it's very much like a team effort. So although I'm doing the text and then writing, doing the text and doing the illustrations, sorry, they're helping me kind of put it all together in the form that you then see it in the book. So having an understanding of design is really useful because it helps me make their jobs easier, and it helps me understand the context and how everything's going to fit together. But again, it's not necessarily a barrier to entry if you can't do it. I think some skill and a good idea is probably more important.
Thank you, Ben.
I hope that answers the question. So.
Very insightful. Thank you. We have 3 minutes left, and so I'm going to squeeze in 2 important questions.
Okay, I'll try and answer them quickly.
One from Kunal Mittal from GD Goenka World School, who says, which was the hardest drawing and the easiest drawing you've ever drawn? And second, which comes from all of us at NLF, if you had to have a set of books on your shelf which have helped you become who you are, what would these books be?
Okay, I'll try and answer them as quickly as I can. So the first question, easiest thing I've ever drawn. There's a puffin in Waterworld, the book after Hidden Planet. It was really quick and easy. I just kind of, something clicked and it was very quick. And the hardest illustration, there's 2. So one, the zebra pattern in Hidden Planet, because like I described, it's detailed and it's complicated, but it's also, you're trying to concentrate on something that was designed by nature to be hard to concentrate on. So that was difficult. And then there's a walrus in Waterworld, which is the follow-up to this one. And that I stopped counting at about 500 hours. It nearly broke me, that one. So that was probably the hardest. And then the next question was about if I could have a shelf of books. That's an interesting one. It would be a bit of a strange mix, I think. So there was you have to forgive me that I can't remember all the titles, but hopefully the broad subjects will answer the question. So there was like a Dorling Kindersley kind of encyclopedia of animals. I can't remember exactly the title of it, but I carried that thing around from before I could read it. And I was just looking at the pictures of it, and I carried that thing around until the spine fell out of the book and it fell apart. So that one, I have all of the kind of the David Attenborough kind of his TV programs. They also are all available as books. So, sort of Life on Earth and all of those. Lord of the Rings, my parents. So it was the first book that I read for pleasure on my own. So at school, they basically didn't really think I could read, the teachers, because I wasn't interested in anything they were showing me. And one of my teachers, an incredible lady called Carol, she kind of just gave me a copy of Lord of the Rings, and I read it on my own from cover to cover in about a week. And they kind of, all of a sudden, they realized that it wasn't that I couldn't read, I just wasn't interested in what they were showing me. And so it was something clicked. From that point onwards, I read anything I could get my hands on. And then Audubon's Birds of America. So almost one of the very first books of the sort that Hidden Planet is. So it's kind of the book that started off the whole industry that I'm now a part of. It's kind of it's the kind of the gold standard. It's the one that started it all. And so I have a copy of that. But the original, the actual real book, which is huge, is at the Natural History Museum in London, and I've seen it a few times. And so I have a very small, not very good version of that amazing book. But so those will be on my shelf.
Nice. Thank you so much, Ben. I'm sure all of us are going to go and look up these books. If we've not already done it, I'm sure that some of the people in our audience are taking notes furiously. I know that The Lord of the Rings has been this sort of milestone book for a lot of writers. So it's nice to hear that coming from you as well. We're at 18:01. We're 1 minute past closing time. I know that you have Waterworld that's come out after this. That's come out after Hidden Planet. You have World of Deadly and Dangerous Animals coming out in May 2022.
Yes.
We
Yeah.
wish you all the very best with
Thank
it.
you. Thank
Are
you
there
very
more
much.
books that you'd like to tell our viewers about?
Yeah. So there's Deadly and Dangerous, which is the next one, and then there's another book which is the follow-up to Deadly and Dangerous, but I can't tell you the title of it yet because it's a secret. But the whole idea of those books is, Deadly and Dangerous. It sounds as if we're talking about, big scary animals with big teeth, and they're all kind of they're all hunters. And the reality is that what the book is actually doing is sort of introducing you again to animals that you maybe haven't heard of or don't know about, or getting you to take another look at something you think you know. So it's kind of taking that idea that we're all quite familiar with of, something that's deadly, something that's dangerous, and kind of flipping it on its head. So watch this space. That the new series that those are the first two of should be hopefully quite interesting, quite fun.
Absolutely. We can't wait. Thank you so much, Ben, for doing this with us.
No, thank you for having me.
I'm sure our audience has had a really good time as well. We'll pass on any questions, very earnest questions that we could not make time for during the session.
Yeah, I'll try and answer them online somewhere. Maybe we can have a kind of a chat offline, and I'll find a place to answer any questions that we haven't had time for, and you can share them somewhere. So.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. We do hope we'll be able to meet you in person sometime once the pandemic is behind us.
Yeah.
And to our audience, also, thank you so much for joining us today. Our next event is on April 9th at 5:30 p.m. with the award-winning author Paro Anand. Please do share your questions with us if you already have them ready. On that note, we wish you all, we hope you stay safe. That you have a good weekend. And thank you so much for coming. Happy reading, as always. Bye, Ben.